Our first guest this morning is a New York Times bestselling author and die-hard tennis player. In fact, he hadn't lost a first-round match in 10 years until he started writing his fairy tale series, The School for Good and Evil.
There have already been 2 books, and the third, The Last Ever After, is due out this summer. We're very excited to welcome Soman Chainani. Welcome to the Morning Blend. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm really excited to be here.
So, tennis player turned best-selling author. Were you sad at all about the destruction to your game when you became a best-selling author?
You know, it's funny because I think growing up, everyone's always like, you can always have multiple passions, you can do whatever you want. I don't think that's true.
You devote a lot of time to one or the other, right?
Yeah, as soon as I became an author, I lost my killer instinct on the tennis court, and that was it. I felt like all my kind of creative energy and my sort of desire to do stuff went straight into the books, you know, and that was the end of my tennis career. I still play all the time for fun, but I don't really play competitively anymore.
I wonder if this is a male-female thing, because, you know, my mom always says, you know, a man needs to focus on one task at a time. Let a man focus.
I am the worst multitasker in the world, so I can completely prove that stereotype from start to finish.
Yeah, you did. We'll talk about the series overall, because this is a very much anticipated book. It's coming out in July, the third in the series.
Yes,
but
yes.
The series overall entails what?
It's a darker look at fairy tales. The whole idea is to go into fairy tales and take them away from Disney, because the whole idea was Disney took kind of the Grimm stories and the original stories and inverted them and often sort of sabotaged the message of those original stories in order to sell dolls and get us to go to Disney World and all that stuff. So I wanted to, it does work, and I love Disney, but I just feel like I wanted to bring it back into a balance of good and evil, so that good doesn't necessarily always win in the story. You're allowed to root for the villain if you want, and bring back kind of the darker edge that fairy tales used to have way back when, because fairy tales used to be something that teenagers loved too, not just kids. And so I wanted to write a series that worked for kids, teenagers, and adults, and that sort of became the design behind this series.
It seems like fairy tales were sort of a take when they were first developed on sort of the morality stories, and you do lose that message when there is always a happy ending.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're bringing it back to that.
Yeah, because good doesn't mean much if it wins all the time. You know, and the whole idea is if you start looking at what makes someone evil in these Disney movies, it's always how they look. You know, so what happens if you take the princess and give her kind of the dark heart, and you take the witch and give her the heart of gold? What happens? You know, and the more you look at a princess and a witch in a Disney story and in fairy tales in general, you realize they're actually quite similar, because neither of them are happy. And the question is, can they actually be friends? And that's sort of what the series entails, is can you make a witch and a princess actually look at each other and be friends because of what they have in common? You know?
I love it so far. I mean, all of it I just think is so intriguing. It's something that we all kind of toy with in our lives, you know, the good, the evil, the you know, making those kinds of decisions and things like that. Each book has a different theme. The first one really kind of that good and evil. The second one, boys and girls.
Boys and girls.
And the third one here is going to be young and old.
Young and old, which is the most fun for me, just because as I get older, it's fun to sort of look philosophically at how life changes, you know, and for kids especially.
But you're not that old.
Well, I feel. Especially when I'm around kids all the time. You know what I mean? And what you realize is, to every kid, you know, age is so relative, you know? So a kid looks at me and they might think I'm old. I might look at my grandparents and think, okay, they're old. So, you know, all those things come into play in the story.
And what's so interesting too, I think, is that there are so many similarities between the very, very young and the very, very old. And I know having my mom having a grandson, she relates so much better to him even than I do.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting sort of juxtaposition.
Yeah, it's who you spend your time with also. I mean, I spend a lot of time working with teenagers, sort of, you know, and I just feel like I relate to them in a way better than I would, you know, people my age. I think it's just who you're around, you know, and that becomes kind of your frame of reference.
You get some really cool fan mail and fan art.
Crazy.
Talk a little bit about that. Who is it? Is it kids? Is it teens? Is it adults?
Both. I think it's mainly kids and teenagers, especially teenagers. And I just feel like they're so passionate, so creative. So we'll get cakes, we'll get tattoos. We've got 10,000 pieces of fan art on the website, because what we did, which was unusual, is we just opened up the site to fan art. So anybody's allowed to post their art, and that's when you get the amazing stuff. And
that's
it's
really
just
neat.
Insane, the amounts of creativity, you know, and it's just it's been the best part of making the series.
Putting the series out there, does it just make you feel like you've actually had an impact to see that these kids, teens, even adults are interpreting it in their own way?
Well, I think because when you're an author, you can write one of two ways. You can write for your audience, or you can write for yourself. And I think for me, when I write, I try to write the book that I would have wanted when I was their age. So I don't try to talk down to them. I don't think like I'm, older, I'm writing for a younger audience. And I think what happens in the end is they feel my passion for the old material, and they get kind of hooked into it. So in a way, I kind of feel like I'm there with them, because when I'm writing it, I really feel like I'm trying to write something that I would have felt the way they do about it, at their age. So.
And you sold the rights?
I sold the rights. It's Universal's making the movie. It's going to come out end of next year, I believe.
Oh my goodness.
And so I wrote the script for them too. Film was where I kind of started.
Okay.
And so it's being made by Joe Roth and Jane Starts. They did Maleficent, Oz the Great and Powerful, Alice in Wonderland. So it's going to be a big.
This is a really big deal.
That's huge.
Wait, so what's the name? Have they settled on the actual title of the movie?
They're going to do it as a series. So hopefully the first one's just going to be called The School for Good and Evil.
Okay.
So and then hopefully they'll just follow it from there. But it should be kind of awesome.
And you did your book signings already, but there are some books available signed at some of the bookstores you visited.
Yeah, if you go to Boswell's, where I signed a ton yesterday, I think Amazon just sold out of the book this morning, but you can get it anywhere else.
So real quick, the movie, is it going to be animated or will there be live action?
It's just going to be a huge kind of one of those CGI spectacular.
Will you get to decide any of the actors?
I hope so.
Really?
I mean, it's a tricky thing because I never specify the characters' ages in the books, so no one's quite sure how old they are.
We're out of time, but who would your ideal be for the first ones? The book of school.
Oh God, I really like the girl who plays Sansa Stark on Game of Thrones.
Oh, I like her too.
She's kind of perfect. Sophie Turner, I think is her name. And she's great.
She's cute and she is tough too.
Will you come back?
I would love to.
Okay,
so,
promise?
Yeah, hopefully.
All right. Well, it was great to meet you.
Oh, thanks so much.
Okay, well, here's the information. Here's how you can get a copy. You can stop in or learn more about the movie, the book, all of the series. It's schoolforgoodandevil.com. That's where you can get your copy of Soman's book. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. That's exciting.